Imagine battling stage 4 cancer for 10 years. That's what today's guest did until he took matters into his own hands and found healing in the most unexpected of places. In this episode, you're going to meet James Cordoba as he opens up about his journey from a life-threatening diagnosis to complete healing. Also, the power of forgiveness and why your mindset could be the missing piece to not only your health, but also your success. If you've ever faced a challenge that felt impossible to overcome, then this episode is for you. Let's climb. Hey everybody, welcome back to the show. Today's guest fought a 10-year battle against stage 4 cancer, ultimately finding healing in an unexpected place. He also reinvented himself, leaving a lucrative career to one that was more aligned with his soul. He's the author of the book, Beating the Odds, My Journey Through Holistic Health to Overcome Advanced Cancer. Please join me in welcoming the inspiring James Cordoba. James, great to have you here. I've been looking forward to this conversation.
Me too. Thanks a lot, Jamie. And yeah, it's an honor anytime that I talk about this stuff and holistic health and so, but it's an honor. So I appreciate you inviting me and, getting ready to share whatever you want me to share.
James, what do people who have survived stage 4 cancer know that the rest of us don't?
That's a great question. In many cases, we need to be shaken up before we make some changes in our lives. And unfortunately, it takes stuff like that, or let's say the heart attack and a car accident. But with cancer, because it's been like some sort, being seen forever as a giant thing, cancer with uppercase letters and in bold letters, there is an emotional and mental and actually spiritual and physical roller coaster going when you get diagnosed, and especially when you start this journey, the mind, by the way, goes to what is familiar. So everybody goes to an oncologist, no questions about it, particularly in the West, from Europe down here to America, to all the Americas. It's just no other option. We have been trained mentally that's the way to go, and so I did the same thing. And but surviving, there's two types of survivors, they will say, depending on obviously, let's see, the extreme or the experience. If it's a 1-year thing, they had a surgery and they went into, they were fine or whatever. Another one is when you realize that, you're just getting worse and worse and worse, but you keep fighting. And I really attribute that with my faith. I'm a Christian, and that was always, with people that may not know this, but I kept thinking of Job in the Old Testament, a person that was dedicated to serve God, 5 kids, beautiful kids, my wife and I both thriving in our careers, and this thing struck. So for me, it was an amazing, it's a 10-year battle, and it changed my life. But it had to be this situation, going through this situation, that when I survived, I realized that it was a blessing. I don't wish this to anybody, but for me it was a blessing because my survival, through my survival, God gave me the chance to sing the song I was born to sing, which is helping people and sharing how I had this faith. The first time to stop all these traditional treatments on almost year 8, I decided, with lots of prayer, intuition, in terms of just meditating and praying and looking. I have to be honest, in my book I share this part, but I really focus on my best coach, which is, as a man, Jesus, and all his miracles. I focus on his miracles. And really what I realized then is that he never said, hey, I'm the Son of God, I can do anything. Yeah, you're healed. He said, your faith Jamie, your faith healed you, has healed you. And that struck me. And it was somebody at church I was living and said, look, I know that you're probably waking up. I'm a cancer survivor, so I'm sure you're waking up at night stressed out and this and that. And I just want you to do me a favor. And I said, yeah, what can I do for you? And she goes, no, I just want you to, when you wake up, open the New Testament and focus on Jesus' miracles. For me, it was just like a shift on the whole process. I really understood that two things, that, it's really my faith, not, obviously Jesus was who he was, but you have to open your heart to receive these miracles. And I, like many people, we don't know how to receive. It's much easier to give. But when you are giving from your heart and the recipient is accepting with an open heart, that's what I call that a channel opens where God can do his miracles. And so when I survived, like I said, there's two types of survival situations. One is, I'm going to keep doing my life like it was before. And the other one is realizing that, I was not born for what I was doing before, which I was doing, very good in terms of, my success as a technologist and executive CTO. So a cancer survival, I have several colleagues that are coaching like me in different ways. I do holistic coaching, which means I work your emotions, your mind, your spirituality, and your body. Everything, it manifests in the body, but it doesn't start there. And by the way, that's one of the reasons why people keep getting recurrences. Our oncologists, they don't know. They're no psychologists. They're not nutritionists. They just do what they learn how to do. But until we find, and that was my case, when I found the root of why I got sick and worked on it, cleared that clutter, I really began to heal from the inside out. So if you take 5 people, 10 people like me that went through a rough mountain, that's my keynote talk, by the way, you can move your mountains. We have that in common, that we put our faith into action, like your James too. So like James says, don't deceive yourself. Show me your faith with your action. Don't just go to church and tithe. Just show me your faith with your action. But you have to apply that faith on you and take action. And that's what I did. Yeah.
I want to go back in the story there. You said so many great things. I want to make sure I remember them all. But when you found out your diagnosis, it wasn't like, oh, you're in stage 1. You were like stage 4 cancer, which then metastasized into your brain. It doesn't get much more serious than that. Mm-hmm. So when you first had that reality, like, what went through your mind in terms of your life, your future? Like, before you switched to, whatever it was that was going to be positive, how do you process something like that?
Yeah, no one wants to hear that diagnosis that you have cancer, which, by the way, it is estimated that 1 or 2 men will have cancer in their lifetime and 1 or 3 women will have cancer in their lifetime. But going back to that experience, I must say that I had just lost my mom 3 weeks before from lung cancer. There was cancer in my Greek side of the family, and I've seen it since I was 4 years old. Family members passing from cancer, including at the end my mother, my dear mother. And so I didn't even have enough time to mourn her. All of a sudden, I was in the sun all my life, playing soccer, especially as a tennis player, as an athlete, surfing, and I thought it was just from the sun, which now I realize even melanoma, it's emotional, and we can talk about that. But at that moment when I was diagnosed, everything stopped. It was like denial. I thought, well, wait a minute. I got my diagnosis. I went to get a biopsy the day before. right in the top of my scalp, and it came positive with melanoma. So the dermatologist, he says, you gotta move fast. You have these two doctors, go and get the stuff right now, taking off with margins, and these are the two best guys in South Florida. So, but emotionally and mentally, it was a roller coaster. Why me? This is not, wait a minute, let me call back. Maybe there was a mistake in the diagnosis. And your mind goes, if we have 60,000 thoughts on a day in the average, or all of us, I imagine when you just hear this news, and my kids, which were young in that time, they just lost their grandmother, their dear grandma, and now daddy has cancer. So it was also dealing with that. What's going to happen with my kids if this is already so aggressive? And my wife, and their school, everything, my career. I had no idea how much that was gonna really, which it did, affect my leadership as a CTO, because it really put me down, and I really had to make a decision at the moment. I did, as I told you before, lots of prayer, asking God, why me? Why me? I'm a good person, a good Christian. I help people. I do work for pro bono. Just different ministries, not only at church but in the city. Organizations like Hands on Miami, or and obviously ministries at church. But so I couldn't take it. I was mad sometimes. I was just really angry. I just said, what's going on? Why me? You gave me the blessings of 5 beautiful children. They were ages from 13 to 7, twins that they were 9 years old at the moment. So it wasn't really a fun experience, and it took me a while. It took me about almost a month. Like I said, I even forgot about my mom's passing, which was very sad, because she was a smoker, but seeing her kind of like, she didn't have a good ending in terms of the disease and breathing and stuff like that. But yeah, it was a life-changing situation, because now all of a sudden you're thinking all this stuff in the same hour, in 1 hour. Okay, wait a minute, what am I going to do? I started with family. Then I said, well, my career, what do I do? Because thank God for my competitive spirit. Tennis is really good for that, because you either win or lose, you don't tie. You either beat somebody and they beat you. And so I started to use a little bit of that, not in that shocking moment, but later on, a month and a half later, that this was another opponent. This was my mountain. We have different mountains in our lives. You could, drinking, whatever, a divorce, many things. But cancer is a steep one, especially advanced. For me, the fact at that moment it wasn't stage 4, they didn't know yet. But because it was on top, it was on my scalp, and it would drain. Melanoma is very good at draining through your lymphatic system. So they actually feared that that could have happened, so they did it right away. I thank God for this, because everything moved so fast. It was almost like it was planned, like, wow. On a Tuesday I get the biopsy. Wednesday I get the result. Wednesday afternoon they're removing that, because it so happened that I have family doctors in my family, and the doctor, one of the 2 doctors they recommended, he went to school with him. So they put me in, because they didn't have availability for like 2 months, about 6 weeks. So I was there that afternoon. And but anyway, that was the beginning. They did a sentinel biopsy, and the liquid drained through my right side. And if you notice, they had to basically And they say, okay, we're going to have to take some lymph nodes around your ear, because I had already, they did a biopsy, and I had a, before the sentinel biopsy, which is almost like a PET scan, it was positive. So they said, no, we got to do some extractions there. So I had my first surgery there, and they extracted 23 lymph nodes, but they had to sacrifice a muscle to actually get to 3 lymph nodes that they couldn't get to. And it so happened that out of those 23, those 3 were positive. So that was really great news. You can call it lucky, but they took them out. So they immediately put me on my oncologist. Everything happened like that. Within 2 weeks, I was already getting that surgery. And this one, the first one, which was ambulatory, it came back by the time they were gonna retake this 23. They didn't know how many, but they just went deep enough. So anyway, it came back. The melanoma came back here. So in this surgery, the doctor said, well, you're gonna have 2 surgeries for the price of 1. I have to remove that again. And so basically, it just started. That was the first that was really the third of 10 surgeries. And basically, they put me on this. They were trying everything. Melanoma was still very, very, very new in the States. Australia and some places in Europe, they were ahead of us. So they were trying. They tried through the kitchen sink on me, that all kind of interferon, interleukin, this and that. But one thing, the first one that they did for me, it was interferon. 4 months into that, I started getting a same thing, like a lump behind my left ear. And they did a biopsy on that, and it was positive. So they immediately, my surgeon oncologist, extracted 22 lymph nodes on my left side of the no muscles this time, and 2 of them were positive. And so they changed the treatment. They put me on a different type of chemo, and in about, let's see, it was I don't know, maybe 2 years, and just going to cycles of stuff, I started to get recurrences. So all in all, I had 10 surgeries. But and it makes sense, because the first focus was on my scalp, but on year 7, just going through different surgeries, I had the mets in the brain. And we could talk a lot about what happened there. I explained everything. No, I didn't take, nothing. I saw in my book, it's everything. My story's there. But I realized, with praying for discernment, that I had to take ownership of my disease. And this is the big difference. If you talk to oncologists, when they have what they call spontaneous remissions, quote unquote, or somebody survives, there's several common denominators. Attitude is one, faith is there, okay, but understanding that you have to take action. So one of the things that I did from the get-go is not embracing the attitude of a patient. I never saw myself as a patient, as a cancer patient. In fact, when I was going to do my follow-ups or from scans or stuff, I would go to the garden of the Sylvester Cancer Center, and I would ask the nurse practitioner to beep me or to call me to when it was my turn, because I wanted to avoid the energy of fears. All this fear stuff that you could sense when people are waiting for their turn, So it is really a mindset there, and understanding the faith. When I realized that it was my fault, that had nothing to do with God or anything like that. I mean, why did he allow this? You know, maybe he has his reasons, which I look back now and I see that he did. But you know, like my oldest son says, you know, you fought so much this stuff. You prepared yourself to fight this thing. I look for survivors of what I had. You know, I remember at one point when I had the mets in the brain, Senator Kennedy had the same thing, a melanoma tumor in the brain. And he went through his craniotomy. I went to my first craniotomy of 4. I had 4 times they opened my 4 brain surgeries, and with no effects, which is also amazing. If you right now you can see, but I have several scars, but they didn't do cavity. You know, like going down. You know, if I don't tell you, you don't know I had gone through that battle. So yeah, I would think that you know, and I have it in the book. Nobody wants to hear the cancer diagnosis. But another thing that is something that I learned by reading other survivors' books is that you're not, when you get the diagnosis, you're not sicker than the day before, the week before. It's just in your mind. Now you know it. But if you don't know, you don't have all these emotions and all this stuff. So in my protocol now, I worked a lot on the mindset and the emotions, which is really where everything happens. I have folks that want to basically, let's say somebody's brother has it and they think this family, which now with epigenetics we find out, no, it's not hereditary, but all disease are emotional. And another thing that is interesting, I was doing a talk in Toronto. They invited me this year again at the end of this month in a conference that all chronic disease, and this is important for the audience, all chronic disease, diabetes, cancer, heart disease, autoimmune diseases, any chronic disease, obesity, start with an inflamed body. There's no question, there's no exceptions. In other words, the reason we get sick is because we have a lot of acidity in our tissue. And how do we get that? It's not only what we eat, it's emotions that we have maybe when we were kids. Even in our mother's womb, we start creating cortisol in our bodies, which really produce acidity in our bodies with time. If you remember that, if you have it there and you don't realize that, that's slowly and very silently creating cortisol. Then if you're stressed out at work, if you have an anxiety because you're going to be late because you're in traffic, whatever, you're producing cortisol. And that's another thing, as a nutritionist, I could tell you, we have to really trick our nervous system to, before we eat, to really send a message that we're relaxed. Because if we eat in a mode of being a little bit stressed out, your digestion, doesn't matter what you eat, your digestion doesn't go well. And I'd like to share this. I mean, we could talk 3 hours, but in terms of digestion and nutrition, 25% is what you eat, and 75% is who you are when you're eating. Are you eating in 10 minutes? Do you chew your food 6 times before you swallow, or do you chew 32 times, allowing your saliva enzymes to start the process, the food, and your digestion starts in your mouth? So that happens very little, and you wonder why almost half of the United States adults have 1 or 2 chronic diseases today. And I do this before I do talks, you know, the state of health. And in Canada, which is, I'm going there last year, the same thing. It's a much smaller population, but when you see the ratios, it's pretty much the same. We just, unless you live in a very small place, a town or whatever, you know, we're killing ourselves. really. We are the ones that inflict all these diseases in our bodies.
So I want to ask a few things about especially emotion and disease. That's a controversial statement for some people, and but you're not the first to make it either. So when you, I mean, you battled cancer 10 years, right? That is no small fight. And it's amazing just your own resilience to do that. I love how you worked on your mindset. Hey, I'm not going to be a patient. I'm going to protect what I think. I think those things are amazing. At some point, you decided that all the pharmaceuticals and the traditional ways weren't working for you. You got off of that. But what I really want to pick up on is the statement you made a few minutes ago, where you said, once I figured out the reason why I had cancer, I was able to start healing myself. So can you expand on that? Or do you mean by that statement, oh, inflammation was the start of it? Or are you talking something more
Yeah,
specific?
no. And actually, I share this in detail, in the book, which, by the way, made bestseller on day one. I
Fantastic.
launched it
Congrats.
on January 2021 in English, and then in St. George's Day in April, I launched it in Spanish, which is my first language, and it also made a bestseller on the first day. A little later, it was almost midnight, but it made it in Spanish as well. Yeah, the reason we get recurrence is because if we don't really eradicate the reason why we got the cancer, we're gonna have recurrences. I don't know anyone except that maybe they got it really early and they just removed the tumor and that's it. But and it is really, when I say that it's emotional, I'm talking, Jamie, about forgiveness. Forgiveness, I have a chapter there. Forgiveness is healing. Prayer is healing. Serving others is healing. All the stuff that I'm telling you are God's already designed, but we don't use it. You might see people that are making $100,000 a month, and they feel that they're empty. That's because they are not using all the part of the design is help others, not just write a check at church. Go help somebody in need. You are the hands of God for that person. Anyway, that is one. But on forgiveness, I just, as seeing cancer as my opponent, I did all kinds of. Google was already pretty good in terms of all the data that you can find. And somehow I heard in one of the services at church, it was about forgiveness, and obviously 70 times 7, and I just said, I look back, and I thought, man, I do have to forgive some people. I also need to ask people to forgive me, and then the hardest one, forgiving yourself. For me, all that clutter that was inside of me is what got me sick, and I kept having recurrences. You may say, "Wow, yeah." Once I started working with that, and I did. I took action. I contacted people. They didn't even remember stuff, but I did. I mean, that's part of the psychology of a human being. Oh yeah, no, I forgive you, or I would tell somebody, hey, I forgive you, and then there were some people that passed that I needed to forgive. So at a Christian retreat, there was a dynamic that was perfect for that. So I was able to, with a surrogate person, just forgive that person took the role of the perpetrator, let's say, the one that hurt me. And Jamie, after that, my wife and we went to see a Fleetwood Mac concert with several friends. I was already, with the news that I had the mets in the brain, and I don't think we heard the concert. They invited us to go. We were almost on the first row. We were down on the floor, and we just spent the two some and change hours crying, embracing each other, hugging and forgiving each other. I left that concert like if I had a piano lift off my shoulders. and the weight that was carrying, and she was carrying, and then all the folks that have maybe in relationships that as a youngster, just I needed to ask for forgiveness, and that if you have the humbleness to do that, you are really doing an amazing service to your health, whether you have a disease or not. If you want to prevent it, clear that clutter. And there's, like I say, my protocol, I work the four legs of the table is my metaphor. The physical self is one leg, the other one is your emotional, and the third leg is your mental, and the fourth one is your spiritual self. If one of those are missing, or two in many cases, you can't eat on that table. That table is useless. And so, yeah, it's... But forgiveness it's really what really stopped my emotional. I cleared that emotional clutter, and now as a hypnotist, I continue to get more things. Like I shared with you. You obviously a nutritionist, functional nutritionist, and I've been adding stuff. And this one is really amazing because without knowing it, I was using it. I must say though, that on the mental clutter, I help my clients to visualize, because one of the rules of the mind is that the mind does exactly what you say and what you're thinking or what you're drawing, what you're picturing. So we might as well, it doesn't know if what you're saying is true or false. So I would say I'm healed. I use some of the visualization techniques that I learned in the national junior team when I was just about to come to the States to play NCAA tennis. And that helped me a great deal. Actually, my coach, since I was little, I was playing the finals in the Venezuelan Open, and I was playing my idol. He was 8 years older than me. I was a senior I was just going to my senior year here in the States. And I get to the finals. I think I was seated 12th. I was like 12th in the nation, and I got to the finals. I had some great wins, but in the finals, I kept thinking of my opponent as, man, this guy is my hero, and I was winning. I just had him. I was ahead for 2 sets to 1, and ahead to win the match in the fourth, and I lost it in 5 hours in 5 sets. My coach told me, he came to watch us. He also coached him, the teacher, we call him the master, and he invited me for lunch. I was just coming back from my senior year, and he said, look, you lost in your head. You played better. You're playing amazing, and so I have this gift for you. And I have a chapter in my book that says a gift for life. So he gave me this book, and he says, look, before you start school and while you read it, it's called The Power of Your Subconscious Mind, and by Dr. Murphy. I've read this stuff like 10 times, and it really helped me, like he said. It's going to help you come back from matches, win matches that you should already be out of the court, So I learned how to visualize myself winning the match, or visualizing myself not caring when my dad came to watch me because I would play awful. He was a Davis Cup player. And everybody, are you going to be like your dad? Are you? So, but I learned that. And then, especially when I decided to go natural, almost 8 years into the battle, I started to use it a lot. I started to use visualization, and that's what I do with my clients. Which, by the way, the power of the suggestion, everybody right now, the mind goes to what is familiar, and everybody goes to an oncologist. They have no other, they don't even think of any other possibilities. So when I signed up people, only 3 in 7 years that I've been doing this have done what I did, and 8 million other survivors have done, not only George's. I mean, I know colleagues that did the same. In fact, I know 2 that actually stood up. The oncologist never went, just prayed and said, no, man, this is not going to help me. I'm going to go natural. It took me 7 years, almost 8 years to do it, but yeah, it was forgiveness. It was the power and the healing power of forgiveness. I already have the outline to write a book about that.
It's very powerful. And I want to go back to Fleetwood Mac for a moment. Did you say that was your ex-wife that you met there?
Well, no, we were still together.
Oh, you were still together, but
Yeah,
you
he
needed to
fought the
have
whole
that
disease with
conversation.
me. We split in 2011, a year before I was, I've been cancer free for 12 years now.
That's
My
great.
last surgery was July 2012.
I think the point about forgiveness is so important. Actually, I just interviewed a CEO who went through not a cancer diagnosis, but a crisis in life. And his point came back down to forgiveness in terms of what he felt turned his life around. I think a lot of people can relate to have some hard feelings towards somebody. A lot of people have been wronged, some in terrible ways. If we just talk about spouses, though, for a moment, and there's a good 50% of the people who are divorced, most of the people I meet who are divorced don't have great things to say about their ex. What advice would you give to someone who's listening right now and they're divorced and they absolutely don't like their ex and they don't even want to be in the same room with them? What advice would you give to them about forgiveness and health and energy?
Yeah, great question, by the way. Yeah, I have a few quotes that in my book, in the chapter about forgiveness. And by not forgiving, the one that actually is poisoning themselves it's one. We are poisoning ourselves with this emotional stuff that we keep. It's almost like you prepared a venom and you're drinking that venom. I suggest, whether you are a person of faith or you just, I suggest that you forgive the person. They might not even remember of what they did to you. Life goes on, but you stayed with that in you. And maybe that CEO was in that position. I would just say, do yourself a favor. Prevent being one of two people that are going to have cancer in their lifetime. 2 men. Women is one of 3. And, as long as you can clear the clutter, your emotional clutter, and especially on forgiveness. I have a colleague he started coaching 10 years before me, and he never even thought about that until when he was interviewing me in this podcast. He says, "Oh my goodness, this makes sense." And so my advice is forgive. And if you have to ask for forgiveness, go do it. It's the ego that stops you. But as long as you don't act on that, you are holding on that emotion somewhere in your inside, in your subconscious mind, and that emotion is producing cortisol. It's producing the one thing that brings acidic to your body, other than obviously eating fast or eating really poor foods. So yeah.
Georges, how would you respond to the person who says, you might say that forgiveness healed you, but you had treatments for 8 years. That probably is what healed you, and you've just now attached forgiveness as the reason. What would you say to the person who says that?
I have to read my book to see really the story, how it went. Now it's in audio, and I have it in promotional statuses. Like for $5, you can hear the story. But it's almost like people asking me, well, if God exists, why does he allowed all this stuff happening today in the world and through history, centuries? My answer, and I heard a pastor say it, is why do you blame God? Why don't you blame the other guy? The devil, the whatever you want to call it, the divisor. Satan means divisor, the divider. So why don't you blame that? I mean, this is a spiritual battle in a way. And so for once, and I'm a sponge when it comes to, you may say something that, it really strikes me, and I write it down. And I become a broker of that message, and I say, Jimmy said this, and I think it's great. So here's what he said. But it wasn't just, it wasn't just, I'm talking about the recurrences. It's really interesting that they continue to come. Melanoma is very aggressive, very unpredictable. My last two surgeries were in my gluteus area. So, and the last one, and those two I didn't want any it's just give me the surgery and that's it, and but it was also surrendering. It was my faith that at one point your ego wants to control everything. It's fear, and you're going, what's going to happen? It's all about me. And when you realize that it's not really you or something that happened to you, I learned that life doesn't have, some things don't happen to you, happen for you. When I learned that, Jamie, by, if I have to share real quick. I went to see a biopsy that, to determine if if it was positive, if we were gonna have surgery, and the surgeon oncologist said, but I want to do a PET scan first, to make sure that it's worth doing the surgery. You might have this thing all over the place. And so my wife was with me, my first wife, which is my best friend today. And we can talk about that also for a long time. There's just no need. There's no need for division. Division is not from God. If we made mistakes because we were young and we just married by infatuation, whatever, but we had kids. And so think of them too. Think of you both being human and making mistakes. Being judgmental doesn't work really. So, but going back to that situation, we were going down we both drove, and as we were going to the valet parking to get our cars, my wife asked me, Naomi asked me, well, what now? I mean, you might have it all over your body. And at that moment, somehow, and I know now, but I just felt like this warm air coming to me, and I just looked at her eyes and said, you know what, Naomi, I don't know, but one way or another, we are all going to be fine. And it was just really God reassuring me. She asked me through my wife. And I just, at that moment is when I started my process of surrendering, letting the ego go. And I saw her eyes and her fear, 5 kids, young kids. I just said, why don't we go to church? Let's go to the chapel. And we meet there, let's pray together. And so I got there first. And some things happened. I don't want to give up everything in the book. But the first thing, since I got there first, I just kneeled to the little altar. And I cried, and I was just crying. And I say, these tears were actually healing tears. And at one point, I just said, God, I surrender. It's up to you. The doctors don't know what to do. They're trying everything, but you can. So at least give me some time to see we're Catholic, my daughter's first communion. She was 7. And my kids graduating from high school. These little things that are so valuable that we take for granted when you don't get a diagnosis like mine, or that you might be somewhere in a war, and all the stuff that you go through are the real valuable things. Your family, the things that you failed to do through your life, that you say, I'm going to do it one day, and you didn't do it. All those things start happening when you hear the knock that, oh man, death is real, yeah.
Georges, we could talk for a whole lot longer, but we're out of time. I know you have so much more to share, but also you have a lot of the story in the book. That book, the link to that is going to be in the show notes, but what's the best way for people to get a hold of you? On your website, qualitavita.com?
It could be in the website, qualitavita.com, and I'm going to send you in that website. First of all, you can opt in and get an amazing little book ebook that I wrote about your pH balance, the pH balance on your health. Disease cannot grow on a body that is balanced. The pH is balanced. And if you have the disease and you manage to balance your pH, the disease starts going away because they have no environment to strive. Okay, so they could go to my website, and I'll send you, if you don't mind, a link to my calendar so they can book a half-hour call, to a discovery call, to see if we can match and help them. And it's not only obviously important if you're going through cancer. You don't have to drop what you're doing. If your mindset, it's, hey, I gotta continue with this. But I guarantee you that you'll find so many things, even in the discovery session, which is complimentary, that you can apply and will help you actually with your healing process. And mentally, I tell clients that are scared, that, oh my, what do I do? Do I live? No. If that makes you comfortable, don't focus on how it makes you feel. Focus on, this is a weapon. If it makes you feel bad, imagine what is it doing to your cells, the bad cells. So now, look, everything that I'm going to show you is more arsenal to your healing process. And then after a while, they start really saying, you know what, man, you were right. Healing happens from the inside out. It's not from the outside in. It doesn't work that way.
Well, George, it's been great to talk to you. And for those listening, all of this will be in the show notes at jamesrobbins.com/podcast. And then look up George's Cordoba, and you'll see him there. George, I just want to close out by just honoring you for a moment. And I love to hear stories like yours where people have had to overcome incredible challenges, and not just a cancer diagnosis, but a battle with it for 10 years. And the fact that shook up your life so much that it put you on a whole path. And as you referenced at the beginning, you now see this as a gift in your life. And I've seen that again and again with people who go through either a cancer battle or some other hard battle. They'll look back later and be thankful. They know it's hard, but they're thankful for, in some ways, it woke them up to a larger life that they could step into. And it's always great to hear stories like that. And as I close, your story reminds me of one of the biblical proverbs: a heart at peace gives life to the body, but envy rots the bones. So,
Amen.
George, it's great to see you. Thank you for being here today. And
Thank you. Thanks for inviting me. It was a blessing.
All right, take care.
Take care.